A lower wetland with cinnamon fern, which is this one. How can I tell? I guess the cinnamon bark, the fluffy bark on, or the fluffy dead frond. I don't know, because you usually lose all its things, but the central cinnamon spike, I think, or at least some of them have this fuzzy stuff, and that's how you can tell it's cinnamon fern. Not to mention all the little pinna on the ground. These are quite distinct too. And there's also New York fern. I'll show you that in a minute. You can tell a New York fern by the small pinna that slowly get bigger as you go up. So you can see they're pretty small. And then, because most of them's broken off, but just because you can tell that this one is, I don't know, you can tell it's New York fern. Like, you have all the remains here. It's New York fern without a doubt in the world. Like, you'll have to see it in the summer, but it's just like, you can just look at it and you're just like, yep, that's New York fern. Just because of the habitat and just the way it grows, because it usually grows in bunches, and it's one of the only ferns that can survive the winter, or at least not completely melt, you know, when it decays. This one stays around for a little bit, so you can tell this is one of the only clumping ferns in the area that isn't giant. The other clumping ferns, like this, it's a cinnamon fern. That thing's distinct. So it's a distinct clumping fern. It's not a dryopteris. Dryopteris are evergreen. It's not a Christmas fern. Christmas ferns are also evergreen. So there is literally no other fern it could be, because it's just, you know. If you've seen it before, you know. Palavicinia liverwort, you can find them pretty much in any wetland, but they're cool to find. They're a cool liverwort. Palavicinia lyellii, or robinwort. I don't know why it's called lyellii. It should be Palavicinia robin. You know? I don't really know. But it just doesn't, lyellii just doesn't, it looks like, you know, I don't think it looks like lyellii. Palavicinia lyellii. It's so complicated for such a simple thing. It makes people hate it. They give it like an actual cool scientific name, like, I don't know. What would you call that? It's flat, it looks like slime. It's like leafy slime. Slimus leafus. We'll go with Slimus leafus for now on. That's funny. It's in the genus Slimeless in the liverwort family. We're going to take a tour of the distinct Clethra maple lowland briar swamp. And you get to take a look at what it feels like to be in Rhode Island sometimes, you know. Get your sphagnum hummocks, you get your dense thicket of Clethra, and then you start getting greenbrier here and there that knots everything up. These areas are extremely diverse, and they're extremely hard to get through. And there's a stream that way, so we're going to see what we find. Here we might have what they call an odontoschisma. That's the closest thing I can find to that. It's some kind of scale wort. But it's not Fruliana. It's, I don't know, I'm gonna look again. This little thing would be a cephalozoid. It's in the family of cephalozoids, or flapworts. Cephalozoids. So we're gonna call that a cephalozoid. That feels awesome to call a cephalozoid. Like, that's a fun name right there. Wolf spiders out on this beautiful 55-degree day in February. But it's not rare. It's happened many times before. It's a common occurrence this time of year. It's early spring, more or less. We have a Plagiominium. And it's a moss. It's a cool moss, and it's distinct. Has these kind of round leaflets. It looks... It's, I don't really know what it looks like. It looks distinct. That's all I can say. Calclidium imponens, and then a nice Palavicinia down there. Isn't that nice? And then Thudium delicatum, and then it's on a red maple with the Clethra. And now we're in a bog. Symphytrichum punicanum, or the swamp aster, right here. More Palavicinium, and then you got Slopocarpus viatitis, or the skunk cabbage. So now we're in a nice bog. These aren't as far along as they were in Bluff Point. We have 3-ball sedge, right here, 1, 2, and 3. And it has these big leaves. It's common swamp plant. It's so cool. It's so distinct. It's gaudy. It's awesome. It's green. It looks like Liriope. And then it has these long protrusions with 3 little spikelet, 3 little balls on it. They call it 3-ball sedge. Kind of like in a creek area. And look at this beautiful sphagnum. Isn't that nice? And it just grows in lumps and on logs. One of my favorites, and it just holds so much water, and there's a lot of other diversity in these areas, but the sphagnum itself is incredibly beautiful. The creek and creeks have some of the coolest stuff. You can find little fishes, you can find trouts. They're relatively more open, so you sometimes get cool species on the shores. Right now I'd be traveling downstream, and usually I'd just be in my normal boots. Because it's winter, I'm not going to fill my shit up at all. But in the summer, when it's hot, and I don't care about the temperature of the water, I'll just wear my, they're basically muck boots. Boots I don't mind standing around in wet. It's an unnamed little creek. Nice and wide, deep. And it's just kind of, meandering. It's not really a waterfall, it's just meandering. Whereas in Connecticut, a lot of creeks that are this size are like just kind of wide waterfalls. Same thing in kind of northern Rhode Island. I mean, I might have enough depth, but I don't want to test it. Testing it isn't fun. You got a little waterfall over there. Of hiking where you just kind of walk in the creek is called creeking. And it's quite fun, but it's best done in summer because there is deep spots always. And I'm not trying to send it and be cold for the rest of the day and have a sloppy sock and a sopping boot. So I'm just going to follow it up. Alucomnium, or alucomnium, I don't know. It is the ribbed bog moss. Isn't that cool? Got Minium hornum. Our horned calcareous moss, so I just call it Minium hornum. We have a Diropterus marginalis, and you can tell because these are the remains, and you can see little sores right there. And it's evergreen, and it has a little bit of fuzz in the bottom, so that's how you can tell it's Diropterus marginalis. There's a few different species, but it's at least a Diropterus, that's what I know. Your yellow birch, your red maple right here, and then you got your dead oak tree with the big Toxidendron radicans, the big poison ivy on it. Look at that thing. That thing's fat. Got all little branches coming out next to the maple. So what we have calling right now is a winter wren. Scutellaria latifolia, or the blue skullcap. It's a little mint family plant. Doesn't really smell, but each one of these has like a little tiny bluish purple flower laterally along the stem. That's why it's called laterally. And it's typically found in swamps such as this one. This one being a seepy, kind of boggy area. It's pretty nice. Another common feature of Rhode Island's landscape is the fernlands, where it's a few scattered trees and it's just a dense cover of hay-scented fern. In Connecticut, these are found more associated with mountain laurels than with, heath, other heath, such as black huckleberry. And typically there isn't expanses in Connecticut this size. Usually they're like pretty narrow, at least in southern Connecticut. I mean, I could be totally wrong. I've only been hiking since 2020, and I've went on many hikes, but I haven't nearly explored any percent of the areas I've looked at. Maybe I've gone on 80 hikes. I couldn't even say that. I would have to count all my albums. But it's fun exploring. Here we have a cerastium, or a chickweed. It could be mouse ear chickweed. I believe they're non-native. They're pasture plants, which, it makes sense because this used to be a pasture. And it's interesting to see. You find them more in pastures. So they're not terrible. I don't see that they're invasive at all. They just have little white flowers, and I don't want to say they're uncommon. They're here and there. Here and there. I have some wildflowers in the genus Viola, and these are their kind of little rhizomes. There's a lot of species, and a lot of them look pretty similar, and I'm sure they actively hybridize, but this is a Viola for sure. Lobelia cardinalis rhizomes, or not really rhizomes, but like basil rosettes. And these have probably one of the prettiest flowers in New England's forest. And they're a typical swamp plant. One of my favorites. And this one has a whole junk load of them. So they're quite common. And that's what makes them so great, because you can just get little swaths of just beautiful red. It pops. It's freaking awesome. I can't wait till spring. It's going to be amazing. See where Thudium delicatum likes and Dicranum likes. Dicranum likes it just a tad drier, while Thudium likes it wet. A Peltagera lichen. That's what I think it is. There's the underside if you need it. It's going to be an iNaturalist, but it's definitely a Peltagera, a pelt lichen. We have little tiny Gallium. That's the genus it's in. It's hard to get to species when it's this big, but it's likely the more common Gallium. Anoclea sensibilis, or sensitive fern. Very nice. Is incredibly variable in this region. I'm sure there's dozens of species. Look at this nice pink one, and this is a different one. Unless this is new growth, who knows? It's awesome. Sedge swamps. There's at least 5 different species of sedge in here. These areas are incredibly diverse. But diverse with sedges. Sedges are hard to tell. You have to do some research on them before you can get good IDs. And typically they're only good in the summer months when there's cooler stuff flowering. It's the trade-off, I guess. Nice rhododendron viscosum. Beautiful smelling swamp rhododendron in the blueberry family. Typically find them in swamps or open swamps. And they smell wonderful. These are giant white flowers in the summer that smell heavenly. They bloom in June. Scarlet oak, Quercus coccinea. And it's like, I don't think it's this one. It's one of these up here. I think it's that one. But also could be one of these. But it's definitely the scarlet oak. We have Ericates hircifolius. It is a late summer blooming wildflower. The flowers are boring. They're just kind of green with a little tuft of yellow at the top. They can be kind of weedy and kind of common, but they're great for pollinators, you know? All sorts of little bees and flies visit them. I think even hummingbirds visit these because they have very long kind of, I don't know. The bracts cover them, and then it has this little cup at the bottom. Well, that's burnweed for you. And then, you know, your other heaths, like high bush blueberry, and there's some black huckleberry, all these dead red oaks, high bush blueberry right here, looking beautiful and just popping. And then I want to say, I can't make a decision on this bush. It's a Lyonia. It's just like a different Lyonia. You know, it looks different from the one over there. Lyonia, it's a lot more red than that one, which is a lot more light. But it might be because it's in like the slight shade. I don't know, but I think they're different. Welcome to Rhode Island Highlands, or Southern Rhode Island Highlands. Open and dead, and it's a heathland, and you walk over logs of dead trees. These were all killed by the gypsy moth or the spongy moth. You have pines over there, so we start to have pines come up here and there. This will likely, in the long term, turn into a pine forest with a heath understory. But that's after a long time. It's going to be a heath hedge forever. I love heathlands. They're relatively undiverse, but there's lots of butterflies to flap around in them, and occasionally there's pockets of grassland like right here. They can sometimes harbor cool plants, like the scirpus. Chia, or pinweed. Little tiny, kind of pinkish flowers in the late summer, and then it has these little ground leaf, little things, you know, and they're usually bright red. They call it pinweed. Got water skitters. It's a type of insect that glide on the surface of the water, and they eat little insects. And they skitter around like that. Hard to get a good photo of, but you can kind of see them. They're really fast. There's one right there. Damage. Deer are doing a number here. That's just kind of how this place is. We got a patch of Ericites. Look, there's some mullein there. Oh, the hay-scented fern. We got greenbriers too. Greenbriers on high bush blueberry. A little creek right here. Clethobria thicket. A oak heath upland, and then a pine land. And I think probably a pasture on the other side, but I'll have to look. That wonderful Thellia hurtella. I love this fucking moss. Look at that thing. And then we got the nice poison ivy on this one too. Look at that beautiful, beautiful moss. Thellia hurtella, come on. And then we got something else, probably a Plagiomynium down here. A small pine patch. I'm gonna continue this way and probably stick to over there. There's your creek. Daisy verbascum thapsus. This is a non-native yellow flowering plant. I think it's related to primroses. Let me look that up. Mephylla immaculata, the very common but not extremely dense perennial. That's a blueberry. I've told you about it 1,000 times. You'll hear me talk about it every time I see it. So that's how it's going to be. Big, or not too big, about a Betulenta growing here in what used to be oak shade. And typically you find these in more humid areas. They're not exactly a highland plant, but sometimes they can be, especially along the coast. Pretty small birch pine land. Birches here are probably 30 years old at most. And, you know, maybe there's a couple larger birches. We got some bigger white pines here and there. This forest is probably only like 60 to 70 years old. It's definitely younger than the rest. We got pincushion moss, and there's leucobirum. There's lots of dicranums. American beech right there. Small beech grove. Fagus. Oh man. Grandifolia, yeah, Fagus grandifolia. And there isn't really much going on in this little cove. Little grove cove, you know what I'm saying. Not too much understory. You have dicranum, and that's about it. Such as this one can have many stemmed maples, and that means it's been logged, and these are all maple suckers from an ancient stump of a tree about the same width from the center of one to the center of the other. So, I don't know, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 feet. I bet you there's at least one standing that has remained in here and not cut. I mean, this one's an example of about how big it was. Maybe a little bit bigger, these multi-stem maples were. Yeah, they were probably a little bit bigger than this. Then they're chopped down, and then the suckers came up with the many stems. The praying mantis egg casing. Everybody knows what a praying mantis is. This guy just eats insects. They get big. He probably just runs along here and eats whatever insects he can catch. Nice granite bedrock of this area. Even though this is a boulder, but it was definitely originated from this area because this is all granite. So we're up on a small hill, and this is about as much view as you get in Rhode Island. Like, alright. This is about as much view as you get. You might get a slight view over treetops, and you might be able to barely view another hill out in the distance right there. So pretty much it's just lowlands and kind of shallow rising highlands like this. And it continues up this way. There's another hill on that side. And beyond that hill, like underneath it, is where the Beaver River runs, I'm pretty sure.